science and religion. We have to understand that in the late Middle Ages, most universities, if not all of them in Europe, were Catholic. Church and state were not separated. And the church, for different reasons, accepted a Ptolemaic system that described, according to some opinion, the earth as the disk, or even if, according to some opinion, described the earth as a sphere, still maintained that sun moved around the earth, according to interpretation of some passages in Tanakh, which we know Dibrat Torah Kelshon Bnei Adam, but they were interpreted literally and they were accepted as a dogma. And we know also that in the world of the church, a belief was something which is above knowledge and above research. And it has to be accepted the way it is. Somebody learned Christian philosophy, and you definitely understand what I'm referring to. At the same time, a group of scientists, based on certain experiments, discover that it can be true, that the Earth is round, and the Earth is not the center of the galaxy, and there is collision between the two views. To the extent that Giordano Bruno was burnt at stake for not giving up his ideas, and Galileo had, finally to give them up, scared of torture in the Inquisition, and that made a very bad name for opposition to science. And again, Judaism was an innocent bystander, not involved in that, but that was the beginning. And from that point of view, forces who tried to justify religious views were viewed as reactionary forces. And there was a general movement to prove that you don't need belief, that you can discover things using your rational thinking and prove or disprove them. That was the collision, the beginning of the collision between scientific community and the church. After the French Revolution, when the church was separated from state in the majority of European countries, the collision took a different approach. There was a feeling that science discovers the truth, and if there is God, we can either prove or disprove it. However, if we can't prove or disprove it, it's a meaningless statement. There was a famous statement by Voltaire and later by Laplace that God, we don't need this hypothesis. Why? Because if we want to design a new engine to build a new device, I don't know, if we want to build a better car, we can do without this hypothesis. So what's the meaning of that? And the peak of this line of thought was, of course, Nietzsche, who said that Ahas v'shalom, that God is dead. There was a joke, and that changed 100 years later. That there was a joke that on his tomb was inscribed, "God is dead, Nietzsche," and then 100 years later appeared another inscription, "Nietzsche is dead, God." But that was the thinking in the 19th century. And that created something called scientific atheism, meaning a claim that science discovers the truth, and we can finally prove or disprove this statement that there is God. And if we don't have any evidence that there is God, meaning there is no God. That was the scientific thinking called scientific atheism. And that was also based on Newton, of the physics of Newton. Newton, by the way, was a very religious person who spent a lot of time trying to decodify the Sefer of Daniel and calculate the end of the days, not knowing that Talmud says it's not a very good idea, but he tried. However, his laws were used by scientific atheism to prove the point. Why? For two reasons. First, you could use the Newton equations backward to infinity, meaning there is no beginning point of the universe, according to Newton. And secondly, there is something called the zero law of Newton, meaning Newton laws apply that space, matter, and time exist as the precondition for his laws. And that was the state of affairs till the beginning of the 20th century. In the beginning of, and by the way, science made spectacular success. If 300-400 years ago scientists were forced to explain how their views are related to religious views, now religious communities typically try to explain how their views related to the scientific views, meaning that science made a spectacular success. And it was the general thinking in the end of the 19th century was that we are moving forward really fast. We have a few problems, but we will finally discover and we will prove or disprove if let's say, the world was created or not, if there is God or not. That was the general thinking. Until the beginning of the 20th century. In the beginning of the 20th century, in order to explain certain astronomical observations, such as Michelson experiment, who observed the speed of light around the Earth, and some other experiments, Einstein comes up with his theory of relativity. And later, quantum mechanics developed. It was not just another step in physics. It created two big problems. Problem number one was noticed by a German philosopher, Karl Popper, who was not Jewish, who said, very interesting thing, wait a minute, what happened? People believed for hundreds of years in Ptolemaic physics that worked. By the way, in ancient cultures created amazing devices. They navigated in the open sea. They built amazing buildings in Egypt, in Greece, in Rome, using Ptolemaic physics. Let's say they used his astronomy to navigate in the sea, and they were clearly wrong. But they used it, and it worked. Then Newton came, and people understood, no, that was a mistake. Now we know the truth. And then Einstein comes with his theory, and now we understand that Newton was wrong too. That his physics is not true as a general physics. It doesn't work. It just is applicable to only small set of situations.